Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest This Week in the Field with the Handyman in the Field. I'm Dustin, and we had a very busy week. I've been specifically trying to fill my schedule as much as possible these last couple of weeks as we get back to the back-to-school season where I'm going to lose my helpers. So I've been trying to essentially load in as much as I possibly can to, one, work out a lot of the projects that I have that are needing more than just myself. And I'm also trying to make sure that I wrap up some of this stuff that is kind of pending. I've talked about this the last couple of weeks. When you have larger projects that go on for a significant amount of time, you run into some problems with funding. I don't like the idea of doing work and then not getting paid for multiple weeks. I try to stay away from anything that's net 30 or net 45, net 60, net 90, whatever it may be, specifically because I've had that happen years ago, and then it's hard to track down the money. It's one thing if it's something that you're someone you're working for on a regular basis, and it's just a matter of like nudging them to get you to pay. But it's a different story when it's a company halfway across the country and they're, saying that they're net 60 and then 60 days comes and you haven't gotten paid and you're questioning why. And they're like, oh, it's because accounting hasn't sent out the check. Yeah, well, that's unfortunate, but that doesn't make any sense because 60 days means I should be getting paid on day 60, not day 75 because you guys write the check on 60 days. I don't like how that works, so I try to stay away from that type of work. So the long story short is that this week there was a lot going on. So starting off on Monday, the Porch job, which is where we're like enhancing it, we're putting in flooring, painting, trim work, all of that stuff. First things first, we had the electrician come out that morning. He kind of flew in and flew out. He had his entire crew there, which was him and 4 guys, and they just blew through everything. And I mean, like, they were quick. Turns out one of the hiccups that caused the massive hiccup in the first place, which was transfer switch on the electric box for the generator, they didn't end up needing it, which in my opinion kind of sucked because that was the reason it prevented my estimate from getting to them, and that also prevented them from getting their estimate. And then the downfall of that caused this thing to drag out to August when this originally was something that I was approached back in May about. So that was unfortunate, but that electrician, he's a great guy. I actually really enjoy working with him. It's just sometimes they're so far booked and there's issues on the admin side. His wife runs the business. Seems like everything's okay as far as that, but when you ask for something, sometimes there's like an extended delay. And personally, I could acknowledge there being a delay if it was he himself who's out in the field, obviously having to do that stuff, but that's not the case. So that's the reason that the hiccup is kind of slightly annoying for me, at least. So I went there immediately in the morning, met them at 7:00 in the morning. They were out of there before 9. I left. I was only there for about 30 minutes to make sure they were all set. And then after that, I had an estimate that was for some exterior work. This was a referral from somebody in my networking group. They have the person who gave me the referral is a painter. He was there to paint all of her exterior trim, and there was a banister, and he discovered some wood rot. So luckily it's part of a fascia board. It's not structural, so it should just be popping it out, popping it back in, but we all know that never goes it's never that simple. And then there was some additional work where there's maybe some aluminum trim, aluminum flashing, I should say, that we probably are going to install to keep water from sitting in certain spots on this wood trim just because of how the door is designed. That's going to be some future work that's coming up here probably in the next couple of weeks. It realistically shouldn't take too long to do, maybe a half day-ish. As long as we don't find any additional rot underneath. That's the biggest thing. So we're working on that estimate. The next thing we had was I went back to the house that I had the lock repair. If you remember last week, I had a broken deadbolt. The broken deadbolt led to me getting a smart lock. The smart lock had a mechanical malfunction within the electronics of it, so I had to get another one. So on Monday, I went back there, installed that, sent that invoice. That was pretty straightforward. It was just put in the lock, but it did require multiple trips. And then the other side of it was that there was some lingering work from before that I had done for the customers, leak diagnostic and some moving of some stuff in his house. So that total came out to $685. Obviously, that had materials involved. If you know smart locks, they're not cheap. The good ones I typically tend to use are about $300 a piece. So you can do the math on that. The next job that we had from there, I picked up my son after he was done with football practice, and we checked out another estimate. This was kind of wild. There was the customer sent me a video. He has a window in his dining room, and there was just water coming straight in the top during a pretty bad rainstorm. And we're not talking about a little water. I mean, it was like pools of water. So he wanted me to take a look and see what the issue was. So we went out there. There were some major issues with the caulking. There was some mortar missing from the top of the lintel because it's brickwork on the exterior of the house. So it's really just sealing it up, making sure that it's properly sealed, getting the mortar repair in there to fix that, and then sealing around the rest of the window to make sure there's no issues elsewhere. He did have additional windows that needed work. He mentioned he had a GFCI on the back side of the house that he needed replaced, or repaired, which means probably replaced. And then when I left, he sent me a picture of a coach light next to his garage that had some broken bulbs in it that they weren't able to, swap out the bulbs because the sockets were broke. I've had that happen a couple different times. It's not a big deal as long as you ensure that the power's off. So I thought we were going to caulk all the windows, do all of this work that I just mentioned, and it turns out I did send an invoice for all the work. He came back and said he only wanted to do the one window and the coach light. So that's pending work as of right now. He approved that, so that's going to be something that we're going to try to knock out relatively quick just because of the damage the rain could be causing. And then after that, we ran to another estimate that was... this was a new customer contacted me from my Google listing. He's out of state. He owns a property that he rents and has a property manager, and he was arranging some work. They had some water in the basement, and they had a restoration company come in and punch holes in the drywall to dry everything out. We're talking about like maybe 2/4 diameter size holes in some areas to make sure that everything in the walls is dried out. So essentially they removed all the baseboards as well. So originally he said he wanted me to come in and do replace all the baseboards that had been taken out. There was also some door trim. So I took measurements for all of that. Then after I had already left, he had sent me a message and said, hey, by the way, if I remember correctly, the flooring down there is not great. So would you be able to quote me to do new flooring? So I ended up sending out a quote for the trim work and the flooring. He ended up approving both. That's going to be a large project, but I'm definitely going to be by myself for that one. It is what it is, but it's a good chunk of work that if I do that for about maybe a week, it'll be a good week's long project. It shouldn't actually take that long. The trim work would take about a day, and the flooring, there's not a ton of cuts, but there's going to be some time really spent in this one area where there's a bunch of doorways. That's going to take some time, but outside of that, it's pretty straightforward. But it probably, like I said, it'll be about a week. I'm hoping the current situation with that is there's a tenant in the building. They're moving out. Once they move out, he wants to get the work done. He doesn't have any idea when they're moving out. That's the immediate problem is if he wants quick turnaround, I need to have a good idea of when I can actually, get this on my schedule. So there's that. And that was basically Monday. After that, I got back to my house. And when I got back to my house, I ended up doing some stuff with my computer, trying to get QuickBooks set up, things like that. I've been working on that a lot lately, trying to get this dialed in so that everything's good to go. But that was basically Monday. On Tuesday, immediately we started off with a job. This was a customer that we previously had gone to, and we did some light fixtures and a ceiling fan. And the ceiling fan had a bad issue with the transmitter. I think that was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. She got a replacement ceiling fan. So the first thing we worked on was that. The new one still didn't work. So there's some sort of issue with either these fans or the wiring, but the wiring we know works with mechanical ones, so it could have something to do with the electrical ones. It's not getting the right amount of voltage or whatever, or there's an issue with the neutral. There could be a bunch of different things, but so that didn't end up getting done. But then I had one of the helpers with me that at this job, while they were cleaning that up and boxing up those fans so she could return them, then I was able to then I started replacing an exhaust fan in the bathroom. So that got taken care of relatively quick. The interesting thing was I had sent her a link for this fan. I did not send her the correct one. I sent her one that looked very similar, but was not the exact same one. One I sent her actually has a speaker in it. So you can, send your stuff from your Bluetooth up to it. So I guess you could have something to sing to in the shower, which is kind of a cool idea, but to me, completely unnecessary. So we were there, but that got done. And then there was a smoke detector. There was a smoke detector that needed to get replaced. She had the spots for a wired one, but she had previously removed it because it would constantly chirp whenever the shower was going. So obviously it was just an older one that was making the humidity was making it act up. So we put in a wired one, new one, should be good to go. So that job was a total of $425. From there, we went, me and the one helper, we went to another job. This was technically a referral, but also somebody from the networking group was paying me to actually do this. She had, her sister has a property that had some shutters, 2 shutters on the front, just decorative, and they wanted them replaced. I had quoted this a while back. I had bought these shutters back in June. They were supposed to come from Home Depot. They ended up never shipping. And after about 2 weeks of waiting past the date they said they were supposed to arrive, I ended up reaching out to Home Depot and said, can you investigate this? They came back after another week and a half and said, sorry, we're not sure what happened, but we're going to cancel the order. So then I had to find somewhere else to order them. The place I found to order them the second time around, they actually shipped them right away. They were here within less than a week. So then I wanted to get them out there to get them installed. So that's exactly what we did. So it was pretty straightforward. There on one side we had, shutters, or we had 2 sets of shutters on 2 different windows. The new ones were slightly bigger than the other ones just because that way they went the full length of the window. That job total came out to $650. Now I did only charge her $590 and she insisted that I was undercharging her and gave me $650. I insisted I did not undercharge her because I accounted for the initial estimate that I had to go out there to do the measurements. I accounted for me being there with the helper the next time around, and the cost of obviously the shutters. But she insisted. So technically that extra money becomes gratuity. So at the same time I was there with that helper, my son and the other helper, they went to the Porch, and their job that day was to prime the ceiling. The ceiling it must have been some sort of stain, to be honest, but in certain areas it was really bad. So I wanted to get some primer on there so that way the new paint would go on easier. And they were having an issue because I made the mistake of grabbing the wrong can of primer, and they didn't call me to tell me that the primer was having issues. So when I asked them how far they got done, when they were done and back to the shop, I said, how far did you get done? And they were like, we only got about 60% done. And I'm like, what are you talking about? There was 2 of you and it's only like 600 square feet. How could you not have had the ceiling done? Now, yes, there's rafters and stuff like that because it's open bays for the ceiling. But at the same time, I was like, what the heck? And then they said something about, oh, well, the primer was really soupy and we weren't sure why. So we were trying to make sure it didn't get all over everything. We couldn't put too much on the roller. then I realized that there was an issue and I gave them the wrong primer. So I gave them the primer that I typically use for cabinets when you're painting cabinets, which was not the correct one. That one fills up a lot of the cracks in the wood grain. This one, I didn't need that. I was just trying to get something on so that the paint could stick to it easily. So that was that. The other thing that business related on Tuesday that I had to do was, so we had at our LATIP meeting on Wednesday, we had a combined chapter meeting. So we had our chapter and another chapter from the next town over, and we all collectively got together to network amongst ourselves, have other people that we could obviously get referrals to, things like that. Before I get into the meeting itself, I had volunteered to organize the food for the meeting, mostly because I still am the newest person in the group, and I'm still trying to make sure that they know that I'm dead serious about making sure the group is successful. So I wanted to show that by doing the food. So I ended up getting a bunch of food from baked goods from Aldi. I had the plates and silverware and napkins came from Dollar General. I had a very small budget. Originally they told me they wanted me to spend $50, and I was like, how am I feeding 50 people with $50? I can't even get donuts with $50. So then they were like, oh no. So then they immediately second guessed the $50 and was like, oh, what, 100, 120? And I was like, and then one of them said, if you stay around 150, that would be fine. So then that's what I ended up doing. So my goal was not to go over 150. Mostly because obviously this is coming out of our individual chapter money. The other chapter had nothing to do with it because we were hosting. Long story short, I ended up getting the plates, silverware, napkins, cups from Dollar General. I went to Aldi, got a ton of baked goods, and some cases of water and some different containers of juice, pineapple, apple, orange juice. And then what I did was I then went to another grocery store in the area, got fruit bowls that were of pre-cut fruit, which that's the expensive part. I knew that was going to be expensive. And then I got some nicer, hardier, like plastic plates so that I could use them essentially as platters for the baked goods. And then what I did was I took the baked goods, cut them up, stuck them on the plates, and then had all these plates to, bring in. I had muffins, lemon cake, croissants. We had coffee cake or Danishes, whatever you want to call it. We had mini bagels with cream cheese. It was a decent spread. I don't have a picture, but it was a decent spread. And then I knew that there was going to be an issue with people wanting coffee. So I'm not a coffee person personally, so it's not something I plan on. And coffee in bulk is not cheap. It sucks because it's just not cheap. It's better if you just have a pot that you can brew it in. But if you go to Dunkin' Donuts and you get the box of Joe, where I'm at, it's like $30 and you get like essentially like 8 small cups of coffee. It's not a lot of coffee. Panera had a little bit better of a deal. They had 10 small cups for a little bit less expensive. So I ended up getting the coffee from Panera. I got 2 boxes. One of them ended up going completely, and the other one was like maybe a third empty. But long story short, the food was a success. I got a lot of praise for it, which was nice. There was a lot of gratitude spread across my chapter and their chapter, which I appreciate. But more of like, hey, this is, I've talked about this before about how I'm trying to like create specific categories of things that I do. And as a joke, I sent a snap to some of my friends that said, I'm starting a new branch of my business. It's catering. And essentially, one of the things that I was thinking of is I have a category called Project Solutions. Well, this was a project, and I definitely had a solution for it. So the tip meeting went well. Outside of the food, there was a lot of networking done. I talked to a lot of different people. One of the people I talked to, she has a company that does promotional materials. So I'm looking to try to find something that works perfectly for representing my business that I could use as like a giveaway to get people to like throw it in their junk drawer and actually be able to use it, but also something that advertises the business. So that's one of the things I'm working on. I did talk to the apparel guy in our group about getting some polos He's going to be bringing me samples so that I can try some polos out, see what works, what fits, what fits well, things like that. And then there was a gentleman who owns a flooring company who has a building that needs some work. So that was a referral immediately that I got. And then there was a realtor also who reached out about some work as well from the other group. And I also had a conversation with the realtor in my group as well. So that said, it worked out pretty well. The networking group in general has worked out very well. I've been getting a lot of referrals from it. It's a matter of just managing those referrals. It's very difficult to manage the workflow with those customers coming in, organic customers coming in, and then repeat customers coming in as well. I just don't have the capacity to do everything or be as quick as some people would prefer. So that's things that I just have to work on. After that, I worked on some stuff in the admin side of the business for a little while until the two helpers were going to go back to the porch. So they went back there to finish priming everything. And then what the intention was that I would meet them there and we would get the rest of the subfloor down, which is what we did. So the subfloor is completely installed. The ceiling was completely painted, and their job the next day was to paint the ceiling, which is like a chocolate brown. And then that they would be doing that. So that was the end of Wednesday. Over on to Thursday, one of the things that happened on Thursday was I had a customer about 2 months ago. It was a referral from one of the restoration companies that gave me some information regarding, I should say, some work in. It was a bathroom that there was a leak. There was a plumbing leak. They came in, they took out a bunch of drywall. I replaced the drywall. I knew that there was going to be some small issues, but I had already done 3 coats, and my original quote was for like a 2x2 and a 2x2 space. It ended up being 4 feet high, 2 feet across, and then the other side was like tiered. It started at 2 feet, and then it moved down, and then it moved down, and the entire space was about 5 feet across. So the space that I was working on was way bigger than I originally planned and had way more spots where I had to make things work. And the issue became, it was twofold. I did not immediately say this is going to be more expensive because you had more taken out. I just kind of absorbed the cost and took it on. But the issue was that I was only planning on 2 trips. That's also what my estimate said, was 2 trips to, put in the drywall, put in the coat, come back, sand, put in another coat, and that was it. I ended up doing 3 trips, and the last trip, I knew there was going to be some problems because of some stuff, but I swear the homeowner told me that they were having a painter come in, and the painter was going to paint the room. And I said to them, the last time I was there, I was like, oh, my understanding is you're having a painter come in. The wife said yes, and I said, well, when the painter comes in, he may have to just touch up a couple of small spots, but it shouldn't be anything that's outside the realm of just minor repair for what he has to do to paint the room. I didn't realize that they weren't having a painter because that's what I was told, and the husband ended up texting me saying, can you come out and take a look? We finally got around to painting, and there were some issues. So my concern was, well, didn't the painter see the issues beforehand and take care of it? And he didn't, because as it turns out, they didn't hire a painter. They painted it themselves, and they could see some spots, especially behind the toilet, above the toilet, I should say, which caused some problems. The issue is that at this point, I've already done more actual work, and it took it took more visits than I originally had told them I would do. So I basically said to him, I am more than happy to do more work here if you want, but I have to charge you more because at this point I've already given you more than I originally quoted you in the first place. And there's just way more work that needs to be done. So if you need me to come back out, this is how much it's going to cost, and I can certainly do it. And, I'm not trying to weasel my way out of any work or say that I finished it, because I explicitly said I didn't finish it. But that's the problem. I can't just keep coming out forever and ever because it's just not working out the way we all want it to. So I'm not sure if I'll ever hear from that customer again, but that is what I can do about that. The next thing on that day was we had and I'm looking at this and I'm realizing there was something else on one of these days. I think it was on Tuesday. I forgot. After I did the shutters and I got back to the office, I ended up looking over some of my text messages, and I had a referral from another member of my LaTip group that was the chiropractor. He had a referral for someone who had a property, whose son's property she wanted some work on, but then also work on her property as well. So I actually went over to both properties, took a look at that. That's some work that I have to quote out as well. That was on Tuesday. So then anyway, after the drywall, I immediately went over to another customer's house where we did some garage organization. It was just some simple stuff that you could buy from Lowe's installed up on the wall so she can hang things on the wall so they're not down on the floor. We installed some grab bars so that she can easily get into her house. There's just one step getting in so she can, get in a little bit easier. And then there was a sump pump, or it wasn't a sump pump replacement because she actually had the sump pump replaced. It was adding a battery backup system for the sump pump. So we put that in there. The sump pump, the only thing that didn't get finalized with that was there was supposed to be a Wi-Fi adapter so you could link it to the app. She didn't have her Wi-Fi actually set up in her house. She had been piggybacking off of her neighbor's Wi-Fi for quite some time. So that created some problems. That being said, she had, so I have to go back there. So that job's not complete, but that was the other thing that happened that day. Like I said earlier, the other two helpers, they were at the house they were at the other house for the porch. They painted the ceiling that day, and then they wrapped that up. Jumping over to Friday, that morning I had a family friend who had a stair rail that needed to be replaced. So I just jumped over there real quick because it was on the way to something I had to go take a look at. I then went to look at this roofing job. It's not really a roofing job because I don't do roofing, but it's more of like a full wall. Now, if you know what a mansard is, that's what it is. I never heard of the term before this guy told me about it, but it's basically a fake roof. It's just basically a bump out from the building, so that way it gives architectural detail. And the roof is in really bad shape, so it's basically just strip it down, put on shingles so that it looks good, essentially is what it is. It's not a small project whatsoever. It's pretty extensive, and it's also pretty high up. So in order to do this, I'm going to end up having to rent something like a scissor lift or a boom truck or something like that in order to get up there. It's only about 8 feet from the bottom, but to the top, it's probably like 16 feet up. And the issue is that if you're doing shingles and you can't actually stand on the roof, you're going to have to be going up and down the ladder, every time you're going across. So the quickest way to do that would be with something that you could just sit in and then move back and forth in as you are actually doing what you need to do. Like I said, that's not a cheap project, but I don't have any idea what his budget is. And I know I'm going to end up spending way too much time putting something together and then it being like, oh, okay, we'll do this some point in the near future. And it'll just never happen because that's just how those larger projects that take so much time to plan out come up with. After that, I went to the property that's down south that we did the water restoration and the downspouts and the railings. There was one of the units had an issue with their ceiling fan. It was honestly the most dumb thing in the world. There was a screw missing on one of the blades so that when it was going around, it would click because it wasn't in all the way. So I had a screw, put the screw in, and that was it. That was $150. After that, we were supposed to install a couple of replacement gutter guards at a house in that same town. The gutter guards, they're meant for high flow. She had a complaint where water was flying off the roof during heavy rain. Now, gutter guards can only do so much, but the main thing is that if the water is flowing at a specific, volume, it's going to hit the metal and bounce off. It's not necessarily going to go everywhere, but this was apparently she had a lot of water doing this. So I said, well, then you probably need to switch over to something that's more high flow so that you can purposefully have the water coming through that goes into the thing rather than coming out. All it really does is it elevates the gutter, brings the water so that instead of it hitting that fine slope and then bouncing, it just elevates it so that it's more of like a gradual, the shingles go over the guard and it's a slow thing for it to go back. The problem is she didn't like the profile of what it looked like, so that became an issue. And we had already cut one of the pieces to make sure that we could show her how it looked. And I had a feeling she was going to have a problem with how it looked, because one of the other things was there was a piece of flashing that she said she wasn't keen on how it looked, that was trying to prevent water from getting into or getting out of one of the corners. That said, the other work that was there was she had a couple of different windows that needed the seals replaced. She had ordered the parts or the seals from Anderson. They had sent them to her. They didn't feel comfortable doing it themselves, so they wanted us to do them. So that job ended up being $4,900. The final job of the week ended up being, we went back to the house that had the water in the basement. We picked up all of our equipment and just cleaned everything up. Everything was bone dry, which is exactly what I wanted. The dehumidifiers that I bought worked out perfectly. That job ended up totaling out to $3,100. Now, that probably sounds like a lot. When I told my son how much it was, he was like, oh my God, that's so much money. And the thing is, we are obviously not a restoration company. However, I was so particular because when I put in what exactly we did to AI to figure out exactly how to price this, I didn't want to underprice this, knowing that we did certain things that it's outside the realm of like a normal thing. We had an emergency report. We got there at 8 o'clock at night to deal with the water the first night. The next night, we bumped our schedules so that we could get out there to get a generator there to get the pumps pumping immediately. We came back the following, or after power came back, and we installed the dehumidifiers and blowers in place to get everything dried out. So all of this stuff is going on, and we're having to adjust our schedule last minute to do all of this. So technically, a lot of this is emergency. I'm not saying every bit of it's emergency, but the one after hours one is definitely. We did chop up trees while we were there. This is all stuff that we did last week, but I was never intending on charging for the trees. It was more of like, hey, we have the ability because we're here and we have a chainsaw. We can help while we're waiting for the water to get pumped out kind of situation. All of that said, there was, I specifically laid out exactly what happened. ChatGPT actually told me that something like this could be priced from $2,500 up to $5,200 in my area, which I thought was insane. So I immediately second guessed, how much I'm actually charging, went through it, and then started questioning, okay, so what happens if the customer gets this bill? Because he never asked me how much it was, because it's just one of those types of customers that doesn't ask for something necessarily ahead of time. Gets the bill and is like, why is this so expensive? So my first immediate reaction was to reverse chat or do an incognito chat or, like a temporary chat within ChatGPT saying, I got a bill for this. This is what the people said that they did. Is this a reasonable or is this too much? So eventually I was sitting at about $3,400 is like the number I was going to stick with. And then I ended up working it down to 31 because there was a couple of things that when I was reverse chatting, reverse trying to figure out whether or not they would get the same answer, there was a couple of different scenarios that I had posed where I was like, oh, they also did these trees, but they're saying they're not charging me. Oh, well, that's an added bonus. That makes this number feel even better because you got this extra thing. In the sense of like, if he plugged in my information into his AI, would it say that I was overcharging? And I really cannot, like, I want to make sure that my business is making as much money as we can when we have jobs like these that we go above and beyond for. However, I also don't want customers to be like, oh my God, that was so expensive. I can never use them again because that was so expensive. I don't want that to happen either. So I would hope that a well-informed customer would be like, wow, that seems really high for what they did. However, let me see if this is actually a number that makes sense. And they chat it themselves. They figure out that it's a reasonable number, then they're comfortable about it too. I hope that's what they would do. I can't guarantee that's what they're going to do, but that's what I would hope they would do. Chat was saying that if you had two dehumidifiers and 2 blowers, it could be almost $300 a day to rent those out. That's to rent them out. Obviously, I'm providing them, and they're renting them essentially from me. Now, I'm not charging $300 a day, but I understand how that could add up pretty quickly. He had those for 7 days. So that could be, that would be $2,100 by itself for rental fees. Now, I'm not charging that. I know that because based off of the number of hours that we had, there's no way that that's how it calculated that out. But that's the thing. There's just these interesting little things that you have to think about. So that was $3,100. As far as then on to Saturday, I had nothing on Saturday. Saturday, basically, I was trying to, again, get stuff caught up. The big thing was what I'm about to get to with the business, the stuff for the overall business. So my business coaching is now complete. The course that I took is done. I'm thankful that I no longer have the charges for it because it wasn't cheap. I think that there's certain things that I did get out of it, but I don't know for a fact that it was worth the money that I paid for it. That's a conversation, I guess, for a different day. But the big thing was I had the insurance company come out to look at the damage on my truck. Their estimate puts it at somewhere near $8,000 of work, and the amount of time that they're estimating it's probably going to take to repair is close to a month, which means I have to figure out something to do with my vehicle for a month, which is going to be an absolute pain in the butt. But yeah, so there's that. We have to figure out what's going on with that. But to wrap up the week, the total for the week was $5,500. Not a bad week. Obviously, a lot of it carries over from the previous week with the storm damage stuff that we had to deal with. Luckily, with the $8,000, that's all covered by insurance. I had a $0 deductible when it comes to comprehensive. It's just a matter of having a replacement vehicle for the course of when they're repairing it. I do have rental coverage, but it's not going to last. It's never going to last as long as this is going to be in the shop. So I'm hoping that to a certain degree, I can get some of this repaired at a certain point and then some of it repaired maybe at a different point. But I have to talk to the shop and figure out what I need to do with that to make it all make sense. So with all that being said, there was a lot going on. I'd love to know the question I'll post to you guys down in the comments. Outside of my normal pinned comments is that when you guys have storm damage in your area, is that your opportunity to find additional work, or do you kind of hunker down and try to make sure that your normal customers are taken care of? Because for me, it was kind of a combination of both. There was a lot of new stuff that came in. I had a lot of people contacting me about a variety of different things. Some stuff obviously I can do, and things I do not do or can't do. So it's a matter of juggling that surge of incoming customers along with the customers that are already established. I always prioritize my existing customers because those are the ones that are already tested and approved. And I hope that you guys do that too. So, but there's plenty of new business that comes in for those situations that can turn into those repeat customers. So keep that in mind. So with all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching or listening to this. If you're watching this and you'd rather listen, it is available on YouTube Music under This Week in the Field. If you're enjoying this content, please subscribe, share it with your friends, take a look at the other videos that we have to offer. We recently did a video 2 weeks ago about tool organization, and then we did another one about homeowner advice on things that you should do your maintenance on. So those are things you could take a look at as the other videos, the other set of videos that we do that we release on Thursday. Leave comments below, like, subscribe, share with your friends, and let's get this community a little bit bigger so that way we can have a lot of comments. Thank you to everybody who has been leaving comments. If you have been leaving comments, I've been trying to respond if you're asking questions. I greatly appreciate that interaction. I know some of you are coming on board now and catching up on some of the older episodes and then getting to the new point. Appreciate all of you guys that are coming up and checking out the old episodes to kind of get a better snapshot on how my business works. So with all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching This Week in the Field with the Handyman in the Field. I've been Dustin, and we'll see you guys next time.